Mr. Kohberger also exhibits atypical eye contact, including an intense gaze. Law enforcement believe that defendant was potentially destroying evidence from the vehicle that was related to the homicides. He uses abrupt, matter-of-fact phrases that can be considered rude. He was in the police vehicle and he was making some statements to the officer. We don't know a lot about the suspect, Bryan Kohberger. He is the main suspect, the one who's going to be on trial this year for the Idaho 4 student murders. Now, the information that we are slowly getting from these court documents, we're getting a little bit of information here and there, but there is no police interview. There's no police body cam. Well, there is one police body cam when he is pulled over with his father, I believe. But other than that, we haven't really seen too much of Bryan Kohberger and his mannerisms. Now, there has been people on the internet that has really looked into Bryan Kohberger. You know, I think on Reddit, they found his like old posts that he may have made, or a ad that he put out trying to get people to participate in one of his, I think it was like a research that he was doing. We know that he is a criminology student at Washington State, and then he was also a teaching assistant. But other than seeing Bryan Kohberger, hearing him talk and his mannerisms, we don't really know too much. However, there is this court document that the defense put out saying that they want to have a motion to strike the death penalty because Bryan Kohberger suffers from autism spectrum disorder. They had an expert that evaluated him. I think she might have been like a neuropsychologist. I have to look up her credentials. But she evaluated him and she found that he has autism spectrum disorder. And of course, the evaluation is going to be under seal. However, in the defense's motion to strike the death penalty, I should say DP for YouTube purposes, DP, the defense has quoted some of the observations that was made by this doctor about her observations about Bryan Kohberger and why she believes that he has ASD. Now, to do the Mr. Alessi thing, or Attorney Alessi, I'm going to outline what we're going to be covering today. We are going to go over that motion, and then also I do want to go over another court doc I found where essentially law enforcement they basically had a sniper, you know, watching Bryan Kohberger at his parents' house and following his movements. Because remember, they didn't do a knock and announce before they went in there and basically arrested Bryan Kohberger. They just rushed in there, and in Pennsylvania, and I think in Idaho as well, you're supposed to do a knock and announce. However, law enforcement gives an excuse as to why that didn't happen. And, you know, well, I think you guys will remember it back to Jodi Hildebrandt. That'll be my tip there. You guys remember Jodi Hildebrandt and the police body cam footage. Remember why law enforcement decided to go in there without having a warrant? Also, these are my old glasses. Should I bring these glasses back? I kind of miss the black frame look. I don't know, but they're a little bit crooked though. I gotta fix it. Okay, just don't pay attention to that. Motion to strike DP. Strike the DP as a sentencing option in this case because Mr. Kohberger's autism spectrum disorder, we're going to call it ASD, reduces his culpability, negates the retributive, that sounds better, and deterrent purposes of capital punishment, and exposes him to the unacceptable risk that he will be wrongfully convicted and sentenced to death. Now, remember, Bryan Kohberger, I think it's if he does get sentenced to DP, like if he is also found guilty, it's possible that he could be executed by a firing squad. Apparently, it's really hard to get the cocktail for the lethal injection. I think there are like pharmaceutical companies that just don't want to make it anymore, and it's really hard to find. And I heard some weird stuff about prisons sourcing it from some weird, odd places. I don't know. Anyways, I just want to throw it out there. Back to this. People with ASD, including Kohberger, exhibits deficits in nearly all the same areas cited by the court in concluding that it is unconstitutional for people with intellectual disabilities to be sentenced to death because such sentences are not proportional and cannot be reliably imposed. Now, the state is going to disagree with that. I think the state is going to say, well, he might have ASD, but he does not have intellectual disability. And if I remember correctly, their main focus was his IQ level. There was like 3 qualifiers Bryan Kohberger would have to meet in order to be someone that we precluded from DP for, an intellectual disability. Gosh, words are hard sometimes, man. Words are hard. Okay, I'm Esau. Indeed, the pervasive media coverage emphasizes symptoms of Mr. Kohberger's disability demonstrates the very risks recognized by the court are already being realized to his prejudice. Now, when the defense talks about the media coverage and other people who are covering this case in general, From what I've seen, they've talked about how he has like this really intense glare or stare. People have called him really creepy, really intense, lack of emotion. I mean, he just has really intense, he got some really intense eyes. I don't know. And doesn't really show too much emotion when we see him coming in and out of the courtroom. But I feel like, a lot of people who typically come in and out, they don't really want to show too much emotion. It's not until maybe something emotional happens where sometimes the defendants, they'll start to eke out a tear here and there. The defense hired Dr. Rachel Orr, who is a PsyD. I looked it up, Doctor of Psychology. She did a comprehensive neuropsychological evaluation of Bryan Kohberger and found that Bryan Kohberger continues to exhibit all of the core diagnostic features of ASD currently, with significant impacts on his daily life. So again, we're going to get some observations made by Dr. Orr because we don't know a lot about Bryan Kohberger. We want to know more about this main suspect that they have for this case, someone who is being charged for murdering 4 college students. Dr. Orr confirmed that Mr. Kohberger has displayed lifelong deficits in social, emotional, reciprocity. I feel like there's a good way to pronounce that word where it just like rolls off your tongue. Reciprocity? How the hell? Reciprocity?
Reciprocity.
Reciprocity. So I had it right. See, I always doubt myself. Let's reread that sentence. Dr. Orr confirmed that Mr. Kohberger has displayed lifelong deficits in social, emotional, reciprocity. Dr. Orr confirmed that Mr. Kohberger has displayed lifelong deficits in social, emotional, reciprocity, including limited perspective taking. So having the limited ability in taking someone else's perspective, I guess, and someone that you're talking to in a conversation, and limited sharing of affect/emotions of others. This one I briefly looked up too. Limited sharing of affect. Shared affect, a major component of social reciprocity. Damn, that word is back again. Why? Why are you doing this to me? Is the ability to share affect with another person. Sharing affect involves using one's own affective expression to draw another individual into a similar emotional experience, such as revealing a concerned facial expression and a softer voice when relating a sad story, or widening the eyes and directing an expression of surprise to indicate excitement about seeing something for the first time. I also wonder if maybe Bryan Kohberger has a flat affect. If you have a flat affect, could that also limit your ability to have a share affect with a person that you're speaking with? Oh, here, let me make it bigger for you guys if you guys want to read with me. Can I make this bigger? There we go. Dr. Orr observed Mr. Kohberger's impulsive tendencies throughout her evaluation, which was also reported by his family. Now, we haven't heard too much from his family at this point. Honestly, I know that they did give out a statement through their attorney, I believe. Let me see if I can find that statement, actually. Just as a refresher for some of you guys, here is the statement by the family. We have fully cooperated with law enforcement agencies in an attempt to seek the truth and promote his presumption of innocence rather than judge unknown facts and make erroneous assumptions. Family said that they will continue to let the legal process unfold as a family, and we will love and support our son and brother. There are no words that can adequately express the sadness we feel, and we pray each day for them. We respect privacy in this matter as our family, and the family suffering loss can move forward through the legal process. Yeah, I think that's about it. But other than that, we haven't really heard from the family members at all. Again, this is all taking place in Idaho, and his family members are in Pennsylvania. I don't know if his sister is also in Pennsylvania as well. Or was it a brother that he had? No, I think it was his sister. Dr. Orr observed Mr. Kohberger's impulsive tendencies throughout her evaluation, which was also reported by the family. A need to engage in repetitive behaviors or interests is one of the diagnostic domains of ASD. Since childhood, again, we don't know much about his childhood background at all. Mr. Kohberger has exhibited compulsions about hand washing and other cleaning behaviors. Oof, must be tough for him to be in jail. Although Kohberger has strong verbal abilities, he failed to recognize multiple idioms during Dr. Orr's evaluations. Idioms are like, I think I had to list them somewhere. Like cats in the bag, or we're in the same boat. Hold on, there's some good ones online. Let me pull it up. Break a leg, bite the bullet, a piece of cake. It costs an arm and a leg to cut corners. All right, so you guys understand. Just in case, there's some people out there who might be like, oh, what are idioms? So although Mr. Kohberger has strong verbal abilities, he failed to recognize multiple idioms during Dr. Orr's evaluations. Dr. Orr noted that his language was often over-inclusive, disorganized, highly repetitive, and overly formal. Despite his high intelligence baseline, Mr. Kohberger exhibits slow verbal processing and weaknesses in certain areas of executive functioning, including cognitive flexibility and organizational approach. Dr. Orr observed that Mr. Kohberger tended to perceive information in a more piecemeal manner and was also highly distractible. Mr. Kohberger ASD manifests in many of these highly prejudicial but completely involuntary mannerisms. Dr. Orr observed that he subtly rocks his upper torso. I don't know if I ever looked at him that closely to observe that while he was in the courtroom, especially while engaged in a cognitive task or listening to someone else, maybe, both of which are almost certain to occur during his trial. His range of facial expression is limited. His baseline effect is stoic. Yeah, I could see that. His expressions are sometimes incongruent with what is happening around him. Ooh, that'd be very important. Mr. Kohberger also exhibits atypical eye contact, including an intense gaze. Mr. Kohberger's facial expressions, including his lack of affect and concentrated stare, are already being assigned sinister meaning by observers. And yes, I have seen that. People saying that he is creepy or has a very intense stare as a pejorative, or simply that he doesn't seem like the type of guy who feels sympathy for what's going on around him. We do tend to highly scrutinize these people that are accused of murders, people who are defendants in a trial. This next part talks about how Bryan Kohberger, well, if he's going to be someone who's going to testify in the stand, he's going to probably make a poor witness. She says that Mr. Kohberger's speech is awkward, both in its content and delivery. As Dr. Orr observed, his tone and cadence are abnormal. His interactions lack fluidity. His language is often over-inclusive, disorganized, highly repetitive, and oddly formal. He is highly distracted by sounds or activity occurring around him. He frequently looks from side to side to monitor his periphery. As a result of his high distractibility, he often needs questions or instructions repeated. He frequently shifts the topic back to himself even when it is inappropriate. He uses abrupt, matter-of-fact phrases that can be considered rude. He carries on about topics in a circular manner and perseverates about specific non-essential details. These symptoms of Mr. Kohberger's ASD will alienate him from the jury and significantly hamper his ability to make a persuasive showing of innocence or of mitigation. Now, I'm sure we're going to have a witness that's going to be hired by the state to examine Bryan Kohberger as well to see if they agree that he indeed does have ASD. There's no need to speculate about what impact Mr. Kohberger's ASD might have on his ability to present a meaningful defense. The prejudice is already clear. In its decision transferring venue of Mr. Kohberger's case, the Latah County Court acknowledged the extraordinary media attention received by this case. Much of that attention focused on Mr. Kohberger himself, in particular on his disability. New York Times, 2 true crime video bloggers have assigned nefarious meaning to symptoms of Mr. Kohberger's ASD. Multiple news outlets have, for example, focused on Mr. Kohberger's social deficits, particularly as how they relate to his interactions with women. Oh, I do remember hearing about this. I think there were women that spoke out saying that he was creepy or something. NBC News accused Mr. Kohberger of making creepy comments to female staff at a brewery. New York Times read an article alleging that Mr. Kohberger made female students at WSU feel uncomfortable, described how he lost his job as a teaching assistant due to his failure to meet the norms of professional behavior in his interactions with the faculty. I didn't hear about that one. Allegations can easily be explained by Mr. Kohberger's ASD. Given his difficulty interpreting social cues, people with ASD may misconstrue social niceties as romantic interest. Yeah, that's why sometimes it's like you gotta be careful who you're nice to, because they might think that there is a romance happening there, and some people might get a little bit obsessive. Anyways, I'm derailing. It is also no surprise that Mr. Kohberger came across as socially awkward or that he struggled to adapt to professional norms. These impairments were hallmarks of his disability. Mr. Kohberger's body language, which has received over 1 million views, infers guilt from his deadpan look and robot-like walk, positing that his facial expressions and body language prove that he is a murderous incel. What? I didn't know about the incel part. Incel? Huh. Lambasts Mr. Kohberger for his glare, blank empty stare, his cold iciness, his intense expression, and his lack of social affect. Noting the rigidity of his posture and his apparent lack of emotion, Mr. Kohberger is showing a level of calm most comparable to the infamous assassin Lee Harvey Oswald. Wait a second. Hold on a second. Did the JFK stuff come out yet? They're supposed to release 80,000 pages regarding the JFK assassination. Bryan Kohberger's psychotic stare entering court hides chilling emotions, his body language expert. Widely viewed, the highly prejudicial media reports, draped in the language of expertise and analysis, both in quotations, demonized Mr. Kohberger for his disability. So those are the observations that we have. I think there's another document as well that has some observations of Bryan Kohberger. Let me see if I can pull it up really quick. Yeah, I think there's just one paragraph here. This is the motion in limine. This was filed more recently, number 13, conditions as aggravator. Mr. Kohberger, again, this was filed by the defense. Mr. Kohberger shared characteristics such as social challenges, perseverance, and lack of that word is trying to kill me today. Lack of reciprocity. These characteristics are noted by those unfamiliar with autism as not picking up on social cues. In evaluating Mr. Kohberger, Dr. Orr found that he displayed lifelong deficits in social, emotional reciprocity, including limited perspective taking and limited sharing of affect and emotions of others. I already went over what those meant. Because of his autism, others may see Bryan as not recognizing social cues, continuing to talk to others when the conversation would naturally end. Over-focusing on the topic or hobby of interest, or talking about the same topic repeatedly, using complicated vocabulary and seeming self-absorbed. Bryan's autism is also accompanied by obsessive compulsiveness and an eating disorder. I think I heard that he is maybe vegan. I don't know if that's true or not, though. But I remember people were saying, they're like, oh, he's vegan. Makes sense why he wouldn't hurt Murphy, the dog. I don't know. I'm just putting it out there. Since childhood, Mr. Kohberger exhibited compulsions around getting things in his eyes. Interesting. Hand washing and other germ avoidant behaviors. Now, the state has replied to the state's defendant's motion to strike the DP in regards to the autism spectrum disorder. I do want to read this paragraph. Finally, if 2 reasons to deny defendant's motions were not enough, defendant has not shown the rationale underpinning Atkins applies to people with ASD. All the concerns in Atkins trace back to intellectual disability. And a person with ASD does not necessarily have intellectual disability. So this is where I probably don't understand the nuance of it, because I thought ASD was a type of intellectual disability. But again, I probably just don't understand the fine details of it. Take, for example, a defendant who was diagnosed with the least severe form of ASD without accompanying intellectual impairment. I think they're saying that Bryan Kohberger doesn't have like low IQ. I think technically if you had a low IQ of like 70 or below, you would be considered someone who was like mentally retarded. And that is something that Bryan Kohberger is not categorized as. Yeah, IQ of 70. I think they did do an IQ test of Bryan Kohberger. I thought I saw it around here. Oh, I think this is them citing a different case. In that case, that person had an IQ of 125. I don't know if Bryan Kohberger, they do one for him? Defendant has no plausible argument that the 8th Amendment prohibits imposition of the DP based on his ASD. Oh, here it is. His IQ of 119 is far above the required IQ of 70 or lower. His IQ testing prior to 18, while lower, is still above 70. And as admitted by his own expert, clearly an underestimate of his ability from what we now know. I mean, honestly, if he is going to be testifying, which I don't know if he's going to testify or not, it seems like he might, as the defense has said, that Bryan Kohberger would not make a great witness. If he were to testify, I mean, if his ASD was very severe to the point where the jury might be like, I don't know if this guy knew what he was doing. I don't know if this is someone that we should be punishing with DP. Now, let's talk about what Bryan Kohberger was doing when he was arrested. And the reason why the law enforcement decided not to do a knock and announce when executing their search warrant, because the defense had a major issue with this, saying that, like, well, they technically broke Idaho and Pennsylvania law. It's kind of hard to determine which law we're following because the murders took place in Idaho. However, the search warrant was executed in Pennsylvania, but Bryan Kohberger is a resident of Washington. We're kind of like all over the place with like the whole 3 different states thing. So we have a Pennsylvania search warrant for Bryan Kohberger or his persons, the search warrant for his parents' home because he was staying there during the holidays, the car that he drove, and then we also had a Washington search warrant for his apartment that he has in Washington, obviously. And then I think they end up having a Idaho search warrant for his own person when he was transported back to Idaho. We're like all over the place with this, okay, with all the different states. Bryan Kohberger was arrested on December 30th, and they said that the reason why they're not going to announce it didn't happen was because of, do you guys remember Jody Hildebrand? Because of exigent circumstances. And in Pennsylvania, exigent circumstances would include, one, if law enforcement kept repeatedly knocking and the people inside decided to stay silent, you know, because just because you're ignoring law enforcement don't mean they can't execute their search warrant, doesn't mean they're not going to bust in on you. Number 2 was if the people inside for sure knew what the purpose of law enforcement was there for. And then number 3, if law enforcement felt like maybe if they were to knock and announce, if they might be in danger of, officer safety. And number 4 was if they thought someone was destroying evidence. Now, in Bryan Kohberger's case, it's going to be number 3 and number 4. And let's talk about Bryan Kohberger's timeline, because I think it's very interesting to go through these court documents and finding out new information that we don't know. And then afterwards, we'll jump into... there's something else that was interesting. What was it again? Oh, that's right. There were statements made by Bryan Kohberger after he was arrested while they were transporting him before he was being interrogated. He talked a little bit, just a little bit. So on December 29th, they were preparing to execute the search warrant, and the team that was working on this was the Special Emergency Response Team. Now, they set up snipers, they set up an umbrella around the residence to monitor any activity, and then they also had a helicopter up above monitoring around. This is just like in the movies. Now, at 12:33 a.m., snipers observed a kitchen light turn on and saw a taller, young, white male wearing a black hoodie standing near the glass sliding door leading out to the deck. At 12:40 a.m., the same person was seen again. This time, officers were able to positively identify the person as Bryan Kohberger. At 12:55 a.m., the light turned on in the garage where the defendant's vehicle was believed to be parked. And then at 1:03 a.m., lights flashed in the garage as if the vehicle was being locked and or unlocked by a key fob. At 1:09 a.m., the defendant was seen in the kitchen of the home, this time wearing rubber gloves and handling a plastic baggie. I wonder what they found in there. Or was he just taking out the trash? And sometimes you don't want to get your hands dirty, so you wear plastic gloves, you don't want to wash your hands. I don't know. Based on these observations, law enforcement believed that the defendant was potentially destroying evidence from the vehicle that was related to the homicides. I mean, again, the homicides would have happened back in, was it November 12th? And this would have been way more than 6-7 weeks later. Based on these observations, law enforcement believe, he was destroying evidence. Also, the defendant was in possession of a Glock handgun, prompting a concern over officer safety. Thus, law enforcement made the decision to shorten the knock and announce when executing the search warrants. At approximately 1:14 a.m., CERT made announcements from a Bearcat. Remember, we're like, what the hell is a Bearcat? I looked this up. The Bearcat looks really cool. It's like this giant vehicle, military vehicle type of thing, parked in the driveway of the residence. Immediately following announcements, CERT effectuated a forced entry into the residence. Defendant was arrested without incident in a bedroom. His vehicle was located and secured in the garage. Also, we found out that Bryan Kohberger's family or his parents live in a gated community. How do you work with a gated community when you're about to execute your search warrant? Do you work with a gated community and say, hey, can you let us in? We're just going to have snipers set up, to surveil. Helicopters can be flying around, I wonder I just wonder how the logistics, how does that work? Or do the sniper team just kind of sneak in, behind someone's car? Or, when you're tailgating someone through the gate? I don't know. I just have questions. That's all. I'm just curious. Once apprehended, the defendant was cuffed and placed in a police vehicle. He was notified that he was in a police vehicle and being audio and video recorded, which he acknowledged. So now we're going to get to the part where he was in the police vehicle and he was making some statements to the officer. But are these statements, are they incriminating? Are they part of the fruit of the poisonous tree? Should he have not made these statements? Was he not Mirandized? We'll get there. So here's what the court says. The evidence demonstrates that while preparing to execute the warrants, law enforcement identified defendant in the early morning hours to turn on the light in the kitchen, proceeding to the garage where his vehicle was believed to be parked. Law enforcement was aware the defendant was suspected of having driven that vehicle during the commission of the homicides and knew that it would contain evidence. Law enforcement then saw vehicle lights flash in the garage as if the vehicle was being locked or unlocked. Immediately afterwards, they saw defendant again in the kitchen wearing rubber gloves and handling a plastic baggie. Further, it was at 1:09 a.m. in the morning, a time when most people would not be removing items from their car with rubber gloves. These observations gave rise to the reasonable belief that perhaps aware of law enforcement surveillance, defendant was destroying or secreting evidence of the secreting evidence? I think there's a better word for that. Secreting evidence of the crimes. The executing officers knew the defendant, based on compelling evidence, was believed to have orchestrated an unprovoked and exceptionally brutal quadruple homicide with a knife. They had information he was in possession of a Glock handgun. They knew he was in a residence, awake, potentially aware of the law enforcement's presence. Maybe it's the damn helicopter flying up top, and potentially destroying evidence or perhaps retrieving his gun or a weapon from the vehicle. His vehicle was in the garage nearby, thus giving him the means of quick escape, while prior or to allegedly killing 4 people, defendant may not have an extensive criminal history or general reputation for violence, as did with the defendant in a different case. It does not mean law enforcement safety concerns were unreasonable given what they knew. So, the judge did make their decision because the defendant wanted to, or the defense wanted to have a motion to suppress the search warrant, what was it again? There was like so many on here. It was the arrest warrants, the Pennsylvania warrants. There was like the apartment warrants, the Idaho warrant to search the persons. And of course, that all got denied. Now, going back to the statements made by Bryan Kohberger while in the police vehicle. Okay, so he was apprehended, he was handcuffed, he was placed in a police vehicle. He was notified that he was in a police vehicle and being audio and video recorded, which he acknowledged. While awaiting transport, defendant informed law enforcement that he had an unloaded Glock 22 handgun in the residence by his bed. During transport, however, defendant engaged in a small talk with accompanying officers. When defendant expressed at one point that he wanted to know what was going on with his arrest, law enforcement told him investigators were going to speak to him at the station about the situation. The details of the investigation were not discussed with the defendant. Once they arrived at the station, defendant was escorted to the processing room to await interview with Detective Payne, which occurred 10 minutes later. Defendant was then informed of his Miranda rights and interview subsequently began. Because I was like, what? He said some stuff while he was being transported. What did he say? Was it like incriminating? It seems like not. So I still thought that was like an interesting detail because, I did hear about like statements that he may have made to law enforcement after his arrest. And I was like, oh, are we going to get to see the body cam? Or are we going to hear what the statements were? But it seems like it might be a nothing burger. However, the defense still wanted to suppress it because they did have issues saying like, oh, well, he made these statements. He wasn't Mirandized. And I think the court ended up ruling that, well, he didn't really say anything that would have been incriminating. I have it somewhere around here. The sole evidence is that the defendant engaged in small talk with officers, with the only exception being when he briefly asked about his arrest, was told that investigators were going to speak to him at the station about the situation. Voluntary or spontaneous statements or question unprompted by interrogation fall outside the scope of Miranda, so there's going to be no suppression of the statements that he made while he was in a police vehicle. Anyways, I'm still sifting through the documents. I'm getting alerts from Law and Crime saying there's new updates, and oh my God, there's just so much happening with this case, and it's just so interesting. There's this other court doc that I want to cover. I was going to do in this video, but maybe we'll do it in a separate video, or I don't know. Oh my gosh, it's just, in this case, I just find it to be so interesting. And I love how all the documents are available. We don't have to pay for it. It's available for the public. So if you guys are interested in reading these documents, I will link them down below. Again, if you guys already haven't seen my previous video that I covered in the Idaho 4 murders, we talked about the 911 call. We listened to the audio. And then also there were some observations made by the surviving roommate, DM, during her 3 police interviews that I haven't really seen before. So it's nice to know like little tiny details here and there. It's not like major details. It's just little tiny driplets. We're just getting a little bit here and there. So I do appreciate that. Again, this trial is going to happen. It's slated for beginning of autumn, which I don't know. You never know with these trials. Like sometimes trials coming on up, something happens and it's like, oh, it's pushed back by another 6 months. So hopefully it will happen by autumn. Hopefully everyone will be prepared. I know it's a lot of stuff for the public defender Ann Taylor to be working with, because I know she got like a lot of evidence coming in. And I think at this point, there has been new attorneys added as pro hoc vice to assist Ann Taylor. So that's good. She's going to have some help because she received so much. There's like so much files. There's like all these tips that they got, all these surveillance video. Like I can't imagine. Oh gosh. Because I'm assuming as a public defender, she might have other cases that she's working, and I don't understand how she can work on this case and then some other cases as well. Maybe this is her only case that she's working on. Anyways, guys, I will keep you guys updated when some stuff is coming out, stuff that I find that are interesting. It's hard to cover everything, but I will cover the stuff that I do find interesting. And that's about it, y'all. I hope you guys have a good one. Take care. What we're doing this week? This week, we covered Ryan Reynolds' motion to dismiss. I'm still watching the Karen Reed stuff. I'm not streaming it, but I'm still watching all the Karen Reed stuff. Well, we'll see. Well, actually, you know what? They wanted to, I think the state and the defense wanted to delay the trial, and the judge is like, no. But I think she did give him a little bit, in terms of like how they're going to do the jury stuff. So it might be sort of delayed, but we'll see about that. And other than that, guys, thank you so much for hanging out here. I hope you guys have a good one. Take care. Man, I was planning on covering the other doc, but like I feel like that one's going to be so long. because it's essentially the judge going through all the motions that he's denying, and they're all defense's motion. But I do find it to be very interesting. So you guys, let me know what you guys think about this, and I will see you guys in the upcoming live stream. Feel free to join the Discord. Have your notifications on for Discord, for YouTube. That way you guys know when I go live or when these videos go out. And then also, we have a vlog that's finally out. Our Italy trip, if you guys want to check it out. I put on my second channel though, because I was like, it might be weird to put all like my non-true crime stuff with my true crime stuff, because we have like serious things happening, and then it's like, boom, vlog. Like, where the fuck does this come from? So I used to have everything mixed up on one channel, but I think I'm just going to have it separated. I mean, it's going to be lower views because the second channel is not as known, but I don't really give a fuck. It's fine. But if you guys want to check it out, feel free. I think it should be later on today or tomorrow. All right, guys? Bye. Take care. Have a good one. I'll see you guys. Reciprocal. Blah, blah, blah.